Richard, you're back. How are you, sir?
It's good to be back. I'm happy to be back.
I'm happy you're back too. Um, Man, a lot has happened since our last conversation. I obviously had Dr. Frosty on. Unbelievable wealth of knowledge. It was a little intimidating talking to her because every time I would say, okay, but this is kind of broadly how it works. And I could tell whatever the subject was, she was like, kind of. She
I
was like,
know.
you don't really understand anything. I'm like, okay, I really, really, because I was like, I don't understand a lot, but like, I kind of have a little bit of a handle. And she's like, you really don't. I was like, damn it.
That's okay. I've been doing this for a long time, and she's intimidating to me.
Yeah, man, she was awesome.
Oh God, she's gonna
Oh
hear
my
this.
God. Oh, it was great. And then I also got to do a tour of Idaho Power the other day, which I thought was really cool. I mean, just,
Great,
yeah,
great. That's good.
it was good. Again, seeing it, understanding the problems of the utility system, understanding this is really embarrassing. I was going to say this to Dr. Frost, but I actually didn't. I didn't understand the nature of the urgency to develop transmission lines. I also didn't understand that Idaho Power does not have a monopoly over power generation, meaning everybody could be going after a gas generation plant or a hydro plant or something. Idaho Power submits a bid for like, okay, we can generate this much electricity for this much money. And other companies throughout the country and wherever do the exact same thing. And they will get bid out as they do at times by companies that can do the exact same thing, but they do it cheaper. They're like, hey, look, they want 100 million and we can do it for 80 million. And then the public utility gets to decide who gets the contract. But there are all of these things where it's like, okay, I had no idea. The fact that they have essentially like a stock market, like minute by minute, second by second power generation. They do the same thing with the stock market. It's like they're buying and selling stuff all day long, and they'll do arbitrage. So they'll buy power at a negative price where somebody just has a glut of power. So they'll get paid like $20 a megawatt to purchase this power. They'll charge up a bunch of batteries and then sell it back to them later on when it's like $80 a megawatt. All of these things are happening in real time, 24 hours a day in Idaho Power because we need power 24 hours a day. And again, just the evolving understanding of what we rely on and what the electrical grid is, man, it's a trip.
So, in another session, we will talk about what started happening back in the mid 1990s to what some people called changing from a regulated system to a non-regulated system. The reality was it was changing from a regulated system, sort of, to a more regulated system. And that's why we have utilities that buy power that's based upon a rate tomorrow or sometime in the future that is screwing up the development, hurting the development of the power that the United States needs.
Interesting.
So we'll talk about that in another
Okay.
session.
So today we are going to focus on kind of comparison of three specific US states. Idaho, which has some of the lowest power in the country, lowest cost power, excuse me.
Yep.
California, which is more expensive, and then Hawaii takes the cake, right? Like they're more expensive than even California,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
We're all using the same power. We all need to turn on light bulbs. We all need to, refrigerators and light bulbs. In the case of California and Idaho specifically, we exchange power with each other all the time, right? When California needs a bunch and we have plenty in like May, we ship it down. When they might have a glut of solar in say January and they don't need it, and we need electricity up here. It gets transmitted, not a direct line, by the way. That's one of the pieces that the Swift line through Lava Ridge was. Idaho Power was making a big point about saying, look, we didn't care about shipping power down to California. With that line, we wanted the power coming north. We wanted a more direct connection from Southern California and whatnot to get power up here. Anyway, a lot of different things, but we're going to compare these three states, the state they're in as far as electrical cost, how they got there, and how we don't screw this up in Idaho, because baby, I like cheap electricity.
Me too. And there's no reason why we can't have it. There's no reason why we don't have it and have all of our electricity already coming from inside Idaho. But I'll get to that in a little while. Let's talk about the case of California first because it's so unique in this country. and we don't want to duplicate it. Every other state needs to avoid what California has done
In which industry exactly? Because I think we could name
in
like three of them.
in electricity.
Okay,
In
electrical
electricity.
generation. Great.
So California got its start early on. Pacific Gas and Electric was going to develop a nuclear power plant in Bodega Bay, which is north of San Francisco. And it made all the sense in the world at the time because they're looking at their northern expansion of power and maintaining the voltage and putting power in that area for growth. Bodega Bay is right on the Pacific Ocean. There's a big lagoon there where they could draw the water from for seawater cooling. It made all the sense in the world. Out came the anti-nuclear industry. We talked about the anti-nuclear industry in our first podcast and how after President Eisenhower gave his speech on December the 8th, 1953, Atoms for Peace, the Soviet Union started pouring money in to communists to stop commercial nuclear power from advancing in the United States. And California was at the forefront of that. So people assembled in these anti-nuclear groups, and I'm not so sure that most of them had no idea that they were really working for the Soviet Union, but they were essentially. So Bodega Bay died. At the same time, or around the same time, Southern California Edison wanted to develop a nuclear power plant on the West Coast, up north of Santa Monica. Where they wanted to develop it made sense too because the ocean was there, the area was growing, so Southern California Edison needed to put more power in that area and also maintain line voltage. Once again, that project was attacked by the anti-nuclear people, and it too died a natural death. Other projects that got started was San Onofre, with San Onofre Unit Number 1. Diablo Canyon was starting to be developed, and Sacramento Municipal Utility District was developing one near Sacramento. Today, the only one that's left is Diablo Canyon. Diablo Canyon's a great plant. It ought to keep running. People in California the anti-nuclear people in California have been trying to shut it down forever. In the last couple of years, the anti-nuclear people have had to shut up because people have a lot of knowledge and they're saying we need Diablo Canyon, and they're putting a lot of pressure on the California government to keep Diablo Canyon in operation. It still is, and it is the last one that's operating in California. But there's more to the history than this. So while I talked about those, what I didn't talk about was what California did, the politicians did in California, and the anti-nuclear people working with the politicians to stop commercial nuclear power in California. In 1974, the California Energy Commission was formed. It's also when Jerry Brown became the first governor, became governor for the first time. The California Energy Commission was told to the people in the legislature, the reason we need the California Energy Commission is to site new electrical plants in California for our growing electrical needs. That was the first lie. They formed the California Energy Commission, and they got, I think, 1 mil per kilowatt hour based upon electricity that was being generated. I think it was only from nuclear at the beginning. I don't know where it is now. So,
And when you say 1 mil per kilowatt hour,
1 mil.
what does that mean?
A mil is
Like a millivolt?
a 100th of a cent.
Oh, okay.
I think it's either a mil. I think it's 0.01 cents per kilowatt hour.
Okay, so they got
Yeah.
a certain essentially
They
like
got a
tax.
surcharge. They got a
Yeah.
tax.
Oh, great.
It's
Okay.
not called a tax, but it's a
It's a surcharge. Same thing. So they get a certain amount of money per kilowatt hour generated, right? So got it. Keep going.
So they had accumulated in the first 3 years about $66 million.
And this was 74, 75?
It started, I think that it actually started in 74.
Okay.
and it might have started in 73, but I think it was 74. So along comes a new plant as proposed in California by Southern California Edison, San Diego Gas and Electric, out by Brawley, California, close to the river, close to the Colorado River. And it was called the Sun Desert Nuclear Plants. A couple of, I think, 1,200 megawatt nuclear power plants. Made all the sense in the world where it was going to be. Made all the sense in the world from transmitting power and joining in with San Onofre and joining in also with the Palo Verde plants over in Arizona to serve Southern California. The California Energy Commission then used its power to stop the Sun Desert nuclear power plants. In other words, the $66 million that had been collected to aid in siting new nuclear power plants was used to stop the Sun Desert nuclear power plants. I happened to be in the Navy at the time. I'm from California originally. So I have to be careful what I say. I had to be careful what I said then because I'm in the Navy. I'm a Navy nuke. So I sent a letter to Admiral Rickover. And I said, unless I'm otherwise instructed, I'm taking leave from the Navy. I'm going to go to these hearings and I might say something, but I'll do nothing to discredit Navy nuclear power. Never heard anything. I took leave. I went to a meeting up in the Bay Area. I went to one in the LA area. I went to one in San Diego. At the one in San Diego was the first time I said anything or asked any questions. But it was interesting. When I was at the one in Los Angeles, somebody who knew me came to me, who had been an ex-Navy nuke, and had evidently told their lawyers for Southern California, Edison, that I was in the room. They asked me to come and meet them in a hotel room, which I did. They wanted to give me a list of questions to ask the California Energy Commission people or whoever they were putting on the stand. I said, no, you can't do that. I said, I know all the questions. If I take a question from you and somebody ever asks me, did one of the utilities give you any questions to ask? I would have to say yes. Well, you don't have to tell them. Yeah, I do. So I wouldn't take their questions, and I don't think they liked me very much for doing that. Then we get to San Diego. Pardon me. The California Energy Commission put their expert up, and he was testifying about the core calculations that were done for these power plants. So I listened to him. I listened to what his background was. The California Energy Commission had gone back to the Midwest and found a civil engineer, graduate civil engineer, with no background in nuclear, to be their core calculations expert. Nuclear core calculations expert. Now,
And this was just a student, a graduate student.
he was just not a graduate student.
Oh.
He had just graduated.
Oh, gotcha.
He was
gotcha.
just an undergraduate student.
Oh,
Now,
oh, great.
in the Bay Area, where the California Energy Commission is located, they probably could have found 1,000 people. That's my number. Maybe it was 100. But they could have found many credible people to do those calculations, and they would have stood up. But he went up against Westinghouse and other people, and he did these core calculations, and he said that the calculations for the Sun Desert nuclear power plants were wrong. So I raised my hand, and I had an opportunity to ask him a question. So my question was basically this. I said, why did the California Energy Commission find it necessary to come and find you to do their core calculations? I said, I'm confused because you haven't said anything about having any background in nuclear or even taken a nuclear engineering course. Is that right? Yes. And you've taken no nuclear physics course, right? So why would the California Energy Commission hire you to be their expert for core calculations? The California Energy Commission immediately shut me up and said, no more questions, and got him off the stand, no more questions to him.
So their plan was essentially just to get a patsy or like a stooge, just anybody up there.
Have no clue. I mean, how could they? There was a nuclear guy that had nuclear experience in the California Energy Commission at the time. And how he could allow them to bring in somebody with no nuclear experience, certainly not even a course in nuclear physics, not capable in any way, shape, or form of doing core calculations, to do that, I don't know. It's worse than amateurs. But anyway, they shut him up, and that was the end of that. Bottom line was the Sun Desert nuclear power plants did not get built as they should have been.
And again, when we look at the broader story here, that's because there was a California Energy Commission that had garnered funding through essentially a surcharge on power generation that was then weaponized against its own energy generation industry.
That's correct. Then it got worse.
That's pretty bad.
Then it got worse.
Okay.
So Jerry Brown and the Democrats in the California Energy Commission then put through the legislature a bill in 1977, and I'm going to try to paraphrase what it says. But basically that bill says there will be no new nuclear power plants sited in the state of California until the federal government comes up with a depository for nuclear waste or partially spent fuel, whatever it is. Well, of course, that's never happened. So we have no new nuclear plants in California. Then along comes SMUD. The Sacramento Municipal Utility District had built a power plant, and it worked. Had some problems. They fixed the problems. The anti-nuclear people kept after that plant, hammering it. And at one point in time, it was probably the best nuclear power plant in the United States today. Then they had a vote in Sacramento area, a public vote. And the anti-nuclear people sponsored lots of support in the anti-nuclear world to have the vote go their way. And they voted against the SMUD nuclear power plant from operating. Now, mind you, I knew many people who worked on it. And they said, this is the best plant in the country today. And it never went back in operation. That's the power of the anti-nuclear people. And that's the power of the politicians who are with them. Now, let's go down to San Onofre.
And by the way, just to be clear, this whole time throughout, the 70s and 80s and whatnot, California is growing really rapidly. The energy needs are growing really rapidly. And as you are capable of generating, or excuse me, as your capacity to generate more local electricity is hampered, you have to buy electricity from out of state, from out of the area. You need more transmission lines. There's costs associated with it. And this whole time, it's like, okay, things are getting more and more expensive, outpacing the growth of, or excuse me, the growth is outpacing your capacity to keep up with your needs.
That's right. And also there's something called a margin. So back in 1962, when I first associated with any utility people, they used to design a system, a grid system, that had a 25% capacity margin, meaning if the grid is going to need 1,000 megawatts, then what they do is they build another 25% or another 250 megawatts over and above that into grid availability for the grid, so they have a 25% reserve margin. Well, over the years, California, I don't know that California led the way, but probably, that reserve margin started coming down from 25 to 20 to 15 to 10 to 5 to essentially 0 today. So the safety factor for reliability and the lights being on 24/7 was impacted over all those years. And the California Energy Commission helped that.
Which is why, at least part of the reason why you see rolling blackouts and brownouts and things of that nature.
Yes.
I have to say, the last couple of years I was living there, man, we had invested a lot of money into solar panels, into backup batteries, all with the intention of having electrical security and stability in our home. And man, the number of times the power went out there, we couldn't. It was, hot summer days. We didn't have enough juice to get the compressor on our air conditioner turning over. It was wild to see that. And like, yeah, we still had refrigeration. We could turn on fans and stuff, but it was it was just a thing. It was just a way of life. And by the way, you're paying through the nose for the electrical.
Yes, and of course, all the time the electrical rates are ratcheting up. So, on a national level, since 2001, brownouts, blackouts, they like to call them brownouts, but these outages, blackouts, have increased 100% nationwide. And it's going to continue. I want to jump to San Onofre now. San Onofre is in northern San Diego County. San Onofre was on military base, specifically Camp Pendleton Marine Corps base, and Unit 1 was built there. And then they built Units 2 and 3. I knew people involved in all of them. I lived in San Diego County, I lived in Orange County, got my power from San Onofre, and friends of mine from the Navy had gotten out of the Navy and worked at San Onofre. One person I know quite well to this day, who now lives in Texas, worked there for over 30 years. So units number 2 and 3 had their steam generators replaced. Good majority of the nuclear plants in the United States had their steam generators replaced. And actually, a man who lives right here in Eagle was one of the executives of one of the companies that did the majority of the nuclear steam generator replacements in the country. But going back to San Onofre, back in 2012, they had a leak from some of the tubes, shut it down. Upon shutting it down, they checked the other unit and they found that they had some leaky tubes there in the steam generators. So what they needed to do was replace the steam generators again. Instead, the anti-nuclear people came out in mass, really came out in mass. And since I would live there, I was able to see it happen in real time. And they hit the entire state. They were up in Sacramento. They were in the LA area, hitting Southern California, Edison. They were in San Diego, hitting, and Southern Orange County, hitting everybody about shutting down San Onofre because it was unsafe. And as a result, there were a lot of hearings that were held. Well, one of the anti-nuclear groups out of Washington, D.C., which is one of the better funded ones, had a person who was working for them that I knew quite well. And along the way, as the hearings were being held, that anti-nuclear group had lawyers attending the meetings. So I called him up one day and I told him that, why are you having your lawyers attend these meetings and trying to shut down San Onofre for forever? He said, we don't have anybody attending those meetings. Well, guess what? I was armed with the names of the lawyers from that organization out of Washington, D.C. that was attending those meetings. So I called him back and I gave him the names of the lawyers. He said, well, I think you're wrong, but I'll check. Well, he knew I wasn't wrong, but he took a few days to check, and he came back to me and said, oh, I didn't realize we had lawyers involved in that. Well, he lied. Well, he's a person that I know really well, and he has lied his whole life about nuclear and being an anti-nuclear person, such as when he was attending one particular meeting that I was in, I asked him, was he still working for that anti-nuclear group out of Washington, D.C.? He said he wasn't. He was on his own, and he was just appearing at this meeting because he liked nuclear power and wanted to support nuclear power to make sure that it was done safely, etc. Well, guess what? I know somebody that works for that company, that anti-nuclear group that he works for. They were paying him $200,000 a year plus all expenses.
Just to travel around and appear.
So
as a
so
positive patron.
so I confronted him alone. He wanted to sit and talk with me alone. I said, great. So we went and sat down outside the meeting and we're talking alone. And I said, right now you're being paid $200,000 a year and all of your expenses. And I know that from inside. And I named the anti-nuclear.
Sure.
So he was stunned. He was stunned. He was embarrassed. He was pissed off. But that's normal for these people. They do not care for this country at all.
So you have the plants that got stopped. Then you have the plants like San Onofre, which is going through, just like parts wear out in power plants, no problem. And there are mechanisms to safely replace those parts with nuclear power plants. And that was the opportunity to say, hey, this is unsafe, it's terrible, blah, blah, we gotta get it shut down. And they were successful in getting that terminated, correct?
They were, because the anti-nuclear community nationwide put a full court press on getting San Onofre shut down forever. And they were successful. And the senior management at Southern California Electric just didn't have what it takes to fight them and keep that plant in operation. But that plant going out of operation also exposed some other weaknesses that we have. There is a formula that when you build a nuclear power plant, you're required to set aside funds for decommissioning. And I think the formula is from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. I don't think it's from the Department of Energy. I think it's from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So as you operate, or as you build and operate this nuclear power plant over whatever many years
Sure.
it is, you're required to deposit money annually or whatever it is into this fund so that you'll have a decommissioning fund. Well, by about 1973, I believed that those funds were inadequate. But I didn't say anything for a long time. And once I did start saying something, people told me that the funds are adequate. Well, I still didn't believe them. San Onofre gave us a great opportunity to find out the truth. So I think Southern California Edison had put together a fund of something over $2 billion. Once they got into the decommissioning process, they found that they needed at least $4 billion.
It's a lot of money.
A lot of money. And that's not the end of it. And here's why I came up with that. I started looking at the changing rules and changes in public policy, which result in laws, rules, and regulations that the nuclear community has to live by. And by 1973, I'd looked at the Clean Water Act, I'd looked at the Clean Air Act, I'd looked at what's called NEPA, the National Environmental Protection
Agency?
Act.
Or
And
act. Okay.
I said, there's all these lawyers coming out of the woodwork and filing all these lawsuits against power plants, pipelines, transmission lines, and everything else. Nobody can tell you what the future holds because of all these lawsuits, which result in more changes to public policy. So I came up with, and I might have been the first person to use this, I came up with something that is I refer to and others now refer to as the total ownership costs of a plant, which means we go from finding a greenfield site to put one on and get it approved to fully decommissioning and return it to greenfield, but still having to deal with the partially spent fuel that's gone from that site. It's no longer on that site, but it's still a cost. It's still a cost to somebody. And it's a cost somehow to ratepayers and taxpayers, especially taxpayers, because the Department of Energy, by law, has had to accept the responsibility for that. And while they're now accepting the responsibility money-wise, they have never accepted the responsibility of a site. So California is the worst case in the nation, and it's what you want to study to avoid.
So 3 big things that I'm taking away from this. One, the capacity for essentially private funded groups to prevent construction of nuclear power plants. Same groups having the capacity to terminate the operation of these under routine, normal operational procedures, right? I got to replace a part. No, you got to shut the whole thing down. Yeah, or we could just replace this one part, or you could shut the whole thing down. That's the second one. And then the third is an underestimation of the cost of decommissioning once you have it. So now, not only did you decommission it when you didn't need to, you could have just repaired it, replaced parts, whatever, and continued operating. But now you're saddled with this gigantic cost, and everybody just thinks, oh, not only are they unsafe, they should be shut down, but they also cost an egregious amount. All the time, the ratepayers are paying for these things. They're paying for the lack of electricity. They're paying for, operating a plant, not being able to operate it for its entire lifetime, and then shutting it down. And then they're paying for the astronomical cost of storing it because we haven't, fully, the Department of Energy hasn't fulfilled its obligation to provide a storage place for spent rods.
That's correct. Now,
so those three big things.
Those are three big ones, and they exist nationwide. But why do we burden that? By the way, I agree that we should pay for all that. I agree that the ratepayers, we should make the ratepayers should pay for all of that. They're getting the use of the electricity. They need to get secure electricity, which they don't get, but they need to get the electricity. They deserve it. We do. But the same situation with public policy is not placed on coal-fired power plants. It's not placed on hydroelectric. It's not placed on geothermal. It's not placed on wind. It's not placed on solar. And it's not placed on magic. Only nuclear power has those burdens.
If I may, if we were going to make an analogous regulatory scheme for coal, okay, you would essentially have to take the coal mine and the coal plant, both required to get coal power, right? And when you're done with those things, would have to be returned. So imagine a coal plant, which I've never gone to, right? Or a coal mine, which I'm hopeful that I'll be able to go to one in Wyoming soon. But you have to take that and you have to return it back to the exact state it was in before and deal with the unfortunate byproducts of that power generation mechanism. In the case of coal, you're dealing with, something people were concerned about, which is greenhouse gases and pollution. So then you would have to engage in some kind of, world level cleanup or mitigation as you're generating power to make sure you're grabbing all of not just the greenhouse gases, but the physical waste coming out of that area. That's the analogous burden that would be placed on coal plants if they had the same regulatory mechanisms.
Absolutely. But what you're saying is what we should be doing, and we're not. And we're not doing it for nuclear either, because we haven't included nuclear, we haven't included uranium mining.
Interesting.
Okay. But we're not including mining for all of the materials that go into solar and wind. So in reality, we should be paying for the total cost of electricity.
I found out today, just a small blip, antimony is used in, I believe, glass that is used for solar panels. So our need for antimony is not just with ammunition and for U.S. defense, but it is used in a myriad of smaller projects, which again, not small when you scale them up. I mean, how many solar panels do people want? But there are different critical minerals that are used as additives to those generations where it's like, okay, where do we get antimony from? Well, we used to get it from China. Now they turned it off completely. I think it was 2024. In 2021, they turned it off for a specific type of antimony. Now they turned it off completely.
But antimony is just one of our critical minerals.
Right, one of 50,
okay.
30 of which we get from China.
Yeah. So critical minerals are part of this overall conversation because we need the critical minerals for everything we do. And I want to add into your critical mineral list, I want to add in both natural gas, and crude oil. Now, crude oil, when we first started getting crude oil, natural gas was a waste product, waste stream. Guess what? Our petroleum people found something to do with it. And we're doing a lot with natural gas. Because of World War I and World War II, we taught a lot of people how to drive airplanes, ships, cars, tanks, etc. So the petroleum industry matured, and the petroleum industry found a lot of other uses other than burning natural gas, other than burning crude oil, making it into other products. Thousands of products. Thousands of products are made out of both. We haven't done that with coal, which we need to do. Same way with our critical minerals. We only talk about national security or defense needs, but we don't talk about all of the other needs of which these critical minerals are used for. And that's why we should have an aggressive program that is equal to the program that we have, which President Trump said, drill, 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 baby, for natural gas and oil. We should have exactly the same thing for mining. If I were the governor of Idaho, I would have called up Trump and I would have said, Mr. President, in Idaho, we're going to mine, baby, just like you ordered the drilling for natural gas and oil, and please get the federal government out of the way.
So, taking all of this into consideration, we have our three big fatal flaws in California. Idaho has avoided some of those, right? Because it's not like we have a fantastic collection of nuclear power plants, and the lobbyists and the anti-nuclear groups, they have no problem coming into Idaho and arguing against it.
They're here, and they're effective.
For Hawaii, what's the story with Hawaii?
Okay, let's talk about three states at the same time, a brief overview.
Sure.
California, Hawaii, and Idaho. California is the worst of all, by far. They're also paying about 34 cents an hour, an average of 34 cents per kilowatt hour for residences. Hawaii is about 44 cents per kilowatt hour. Idaho is about 9 cents per kilowatt hour. Why the differences? California, it's by design. Idaho, it's by design. Idaho is by happenstance. What I mean by that is, California, the leftists, whatever you want to call them, have caused the cost of electricity in California to do nothing but go up. And it's going to continue that way for quite some time. The state of Hawaii is just foolish. State of Hawaii doesn't want nuclear.
Oh, you said in Hawaii. You said in Idaho it's happenstance.
In Hawaii, it's happenstance.
Oh, in Hawaii,
Let's
gotcha.
go back to Hawaii.
Okay, and you were saying Hawaii's the worst out of the three.
No, California's the worst out of the three because they made it purposely that way.
Okay, and Hawaii's just bad.
Hawaii says they don't want nuclear. What do you mean they don't want nuclear? The first nuclear submarine visited Hawaii in 1957. Nuclear submarines have been in Hawaii since 1957. A nuclear submarine was sent up to the island of Kauai after a bad storm came through there, and they tried to provide power to the city of Lihue. Hawaii has had nuclear power in Hawaii all these years. And Hawaii is against nuclear power? Why? It's the stupidest thing I ever heard of. But they still are. Now, they're going to change, but not yet. But they're going to change. They have to, because they have no other options. 90% of Hawaii's energy comes from oil. It has to be imported. They used to bring imported coal in from Kalimantan in Indonesia. And to Barber's Point, there was a coal-fired power plant there that just went out of operation a few years ago. Now, the coal for that power plant was going to come out of Utah. But we had a president who suddenly showed up in the north rim of the Grand Canyon and put all those coal lands in Utah out of bounds by creating a national monument. Who did he create the national monument for? For China. Because he got pressure from people in Indonesia who had clean coal. So 800,000 metric tons a year of coal from Indonesia that went to Barbers Point in Hawaii should have come from Utah.
Wait, what's a national monument?
It's called, you would ask me that. It's I used to know the name of it. But it's like 1.4 million acres that Bill Clinton, over a 72-hour period, created it and set it aside. But he put it aside for his Chinese backers who own coal mines in Indonesia.
Oh my God. And okay, so bottom line is there's a gigantic coal reserve in, what is it, Arizona?
In Utah.
In Utah, excuse me.
It's clean coal, by the way, very similar to Powder River Basin. Powder River Basin's, there's two big clean coal deposits in the world, Powder River Basin and Kalimantan in Indonesia.
Okay, you'll have to explain the concept of clean coal to me later, because
Cleaner coal.
Cleaner coal. So bottom line is Utah has this, cleaner coal reserve, and Bill Clinton decides, hey, we should make a national monument out of that area for no particular reason, and let's make it gigantic, right? We're not talking about a national forest, state forest. We're talking about a national monument, million plus acres.
I think it was 1.4 or 1.7 million acres.
In 72 hours.
In 72 hours.
And the result of this is that there are coal supplies in Indonesia that were owned by Chinese investors that then were the sole source of coal for the island of Hawaii, the
Island
state of Hawaii.
Oahu at Barbers Point. 800,000 tons. Metric tons a year they sent there for 20 some years.
Gosh, man.
The politics
and
and
energy
security,
are just,
that's right.
it's unbelievable. Because you're talking about countrywide resources. The politics involved of that is just, it boggles my mind. Every time I talk to somebody, I'm like, wait, this is, that's why they're stopping this? Or these are the levers? And it's always 3 or 4 points. It's okay, this guy owns that thing. So what they have to do is they actually have to stop this supply over here. And they did that not by addressing that directly, but doing something that's we're going to declare it a, national monument. It's so great. For what reason? Oh, it's just really important. And then, of course, 3 levels later, oh, now we're paying way more to this country that's predominantly owned by this other country.
Yeah, and what President Clinton did was, there were people in Utah that put their own money into those coal mines. I think there were 10 of them, close to 10 of them. And it was their own money. They developed it under the auspices of all the rules and regulations of the federal government that they had to pay for. And they were to the point of ready for production. 10 years worth of work, 10 years worth of investing by the private sector in the United States for an energy supply for the island of Oahu. And Bill Clinton stopped it in 72 hours. That's why people don't trust the government. Changes in public policy in Washington, D.C. have a much broader effect than most people realize.
So that's Hawaii.
That's Hawaii. Now we get to Idaho. Idaho's got a lot of hydro. Idaho has had hydro
Long time.
since the early 1900s. Idaho Power has the largest service area in Idaho. They have, I think, something like 17 of the 140 hydro plants in Idaho. I think they have all the largest ones. So Idaho was known to me long before I ever moved here, that if you ever wanted to get a good job at a utility, either go to work for Hawaiian Electric or go to work for Idaho Power. Idaho Power was resting on its fact that it had a very low population. Idaho Power served an area that was growing in population, but a good majority of it. But they had hydro, lots of hydro. But the percentage of hydro has been to overall electricity has been decreasing over time. And Idaho Power knows that. State of Idaho knows that. Legislature knows that. Governors have known that.
Right. So
Idaho,
essentially, whereas it used to generate, let's say, 40% of the overall energy needs, now it's down to like, let's say, 20% of the overall energy needs.
yeah,
Something like that,
I
whatever the
think
numbers
in
are.
2001 it was 51%.
Gotcha.
And I think today it's something like 34% or
Gotcha.
something like
Okay.
that. But Idaho also has ignored the fact that in 1950, the first, essentially, what could be a commercial nuclear power plant went critical in the state of Idaho. Had the previous governors, had the previous legislatures in the state of Idaho adopted nuclear power for Idaho, what we would have today is we would have a state that has hydro and nuclear mostly, very clean energy sources, pardon me, and we would have a low rate because the nuclear plants would be amortized out, so would the hydro plants, and we might even have, instead of 9 cents per hour, we might be paying 6 or 7 cents an hour for electricity. But for some reason, no governor and no legislator ever took advantage of the nuclear being here in Idaho to start with.
Yeah, Arco's pretty cool driving through it. It's like, it's the first atomic city. And you realize that, I have a friend who was actually born out in Arco. And so the story goes that 30, 40, 50 years ago, Arco was a happening place. There was a lot of optimism around the industry that would continue to develop out there. And had INL, the research continued there and had, like perhaps you would have a greater population. Arco might be a bigger city. You'd have a larger population there. Maybe you wouldn't have people getting bussed in from, Idaho Falls in the same manner. But it is interesting. We drove through it. I didn't know anything about it until it was like a year and a half ago. And we drove through and we're like, the atomic city, like what's this place? Didn't know anything about it, right? Like I'm learning as I go. And then again, coming to find out that history, it's like, wait, they turned on the first light bulb in like 53 or something in Arco with nuclear energy. This is wild stuff. And then it literally looks like a time capsule. Like it just stopped.
That's true. So when I went out, my first trip out there to the National Reactor Testing Station was in 1965, when I went out to learn how to operate and get certified, qualified, to operate my first Navy reactor. And Navy had established a site out there when the National Reactor Testing Station first started. I graduated from nuclear power school in Vallejo, California. And I get sent up here to Idaho to qualify my first reactor. And in doing so, I got to know the area pretty well. Knew all about the history of it from the people who were here. I lived in Pocatello. There were 3 main cities you could live in as a Navy nuke, Idaho Falls, Pocatello, and Blackfoot in between, each one of them about 25 miles apart. The majority of the guys lived in Idaho Falls. I didn't want to be with them, so I lived in Pocatello. But then there's Arco. So on the other side of the National Reactor Testing Station is the city of Arco. So we'd all heard about it. We all went out there at one time or another and looked around it and stuff. And so probably the first time I drove out there was sometime before the winter of '65. I've been there many times since we moved here in 2015, and Arco hasn't changed one iota. And there's no reason for that. The simple reason is because, for whatever reason, every governor and every session of the legislature has failed to take advantage of the National Reactor Testing Station and the first reactors that were put there, and we should have them here serving the entire state of Idaho instead of importing however many megawatts a day we have to import because we don't produce it here. We would be producing enough electricity in Idaho right now that's clean and safe from nuclear and hydro to attract manufacturing, clean, good, new, modern manufacturing, to attract data centers that we could actually supply the power to. Conversely to where we really don't have the power to supply to the Meta data center that's going in South Kuna.
That's a lot. There's a lot. So in the case of Idaho, we have been able to maintain a lower utility rate, but it's not as low as it could be. And we were predominantly able to do that because we had the golden goose of hydro, which made everything kind of pencil out for a long time. But as we're getting the screws tightened on us with the number of people and the consumption needs, both from the residential and the large load customers, the micron expansion, the data centers, as we have that, we're going to have to enter the more expensive market that everybody else is playing around in because we don't have another goose that lays the golden egg like hydro. But we could initiate nuclear plants, right? We could have those go critical. Every time you say go critical, I always think like, when you say critical, it's like, oh, is that bad? It's like, yeah, no, it just meant you got to a point of criticality of where it's
producing power.
Yeah, producing power. Like the fission's happening, and
that's a bad habit that we nukes have.
Yeah,
we just simply call it going critical.
Like
but it's producing power.
Yeah, right.
And there's no reason why Idaho has not jumped on that bandwagon. They've known, for instance, 9/11 attack on America. We had a handful of commercial data centers in the United States, literally just a handful. Today we have over 5,300. And we're growing them. We're going to grow a lot more. And we need to. A lot of controversy over them.
There shouldn't be. Do you like your phone? Do you like Chatty GPT? Like, come on, man.
No, but here's another big reason for having them. We need to add to our computing power in the United States. We need to add to our computing power so that we can make decisions quicker. We can make things quicker to stay ahead of our primary adversary, China. And we're only going to do that if we supply the computing power to you and me. And the only way that that's happening, when I say you and me, I'm just using us as two examples
Sure.
of somebody who can add something to our country. We don't know who they are. You know, of the 340 million people here in the United States, we don't know who that next person's going to be, like who's going to come up with something that is going to make the difference in medicine, or going to make the difference in health, going to make the difference in aerospace, going to make the difference in energy, going to make the difference in agriculture. Right. Agriculture alone. We need to be shifting agriculture from the way we do it now for food security into greenhouses that are robotic. AI should be helping them, and an integrated growing house with processing and packaging for delivery.
Here's a wild one, and I'm trying to find out if this is actually rolled out. But for agriculture, weed control, nobody likes Roundup. Okay, totally fine, right? Like consumers don't like Roundup, glyphosate, the whole bit. Like totally, and I'm not saying you shouldn't. None of my affair, right? We can just acknowledge, like you say glyphosate or Roundup, in general, people are like, not too happy, right?
Yep.
There are these mass boom arms that go around. So instead of spraying, first off, before glyphosate, they had a chemical cocktail that was like 5 or 6 different chemicals. And because it was less effective, they had to dump it all the time. So, and you had, manual removal. So you had a lot of problems before this. So technology is evolving. We don't like the position we're in now. Okay, totally fine. Anyway, you have these boom arms that use I think it's AI and like these real specific centers. So instead of spraying glyphosate everywhere, we've reduced the usage of glyphosate to have these little targeted applications. So this tractor goes out with these 40-foot booms on either side with all of these teeny little sprayers that are like little squirt guns. And they go over and sense where so that you're not spraying a broad area, you're just hitting this weed. But you go one step further, and it's my understanding that there's a farming technology that uses lasers that quite literally goes over and just beep, fries the weed, kill the weed.
Well,
takes a lot of power.
That's
Takes
true.
power. But then no chemicals. Right? You're like, we want to get away from glyphosate. If we could just put a giant battery pack on this tractor, great. And we just throw the tractor out there and beep, 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 firing, and we use lasers in dermatology. We use lasers all over the place. Like there's laser technology available. They could use a focused laser, energy source and destroy weeds without any chemicals at all. We just need a lot of power.
Yes, but what you're talking about is you're talking about evolving technology, evolvement in material science. The reason that those tractors can now go through there and selectively spray is because you used the word sensor.
Right.
Sensor technology, like material science, has no end. I have been telling people that I've known that have gone into the sensor business.
One second, sorry. 1 second. My apologies here.
You broke it.
Apparently I did. Let's just make sure. Oh my God. All good. Apparently, this is why we have backups, Richard. Apparently, the audio quit on us. But see that little guy with the green light?
Yes.
That's a backup, baby. We still got this whole thing. I was like, we can't. Yeah, so we're good. I'm sorry. Keep
So
going.
sensor technology. So friends of mine over the past 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, whatever it's been, that have gone into the sensor technology business or people that I've met, I said, you're in a great field. You will never run out of a job because sensors will continue to evolve. And you've just talked about one of them. These spray booms that you talk about that have the ability to sense a weed can do so because of sensor technology. And you also made a good point with the ability to use lasers. Laser technology in the last 30 years has significantly advanced. We have lasers that are amazing, and there's no end to them. And they also are getting to the point that we're being able to use less and less power, but they do need power.
Right. Oh, right.
So, but we also have the same lasers in robotics that can tell you if an apple is ripe and ready to pick. We have the same laser technology that's available to pick strawberries. Strawberries are a whole lot harder to pick and not damage than apples. But yet we have robotics now with sensors to tell the system that this particular strawberry is ready to be picked. Food security. Food security is a huge item that we're not addressing. But we have the ability to do it simply by combining growing in a greenhouse, an environmentally controlled greenhouse, with processing, food processing, and with packaging. And right now, the combined heat and power is almost totally from the electrical grid and from natural gas. When you can take a micro reactor like the molten salt nuclear battery to power the whole thing, you don't need power from the grid and you don't need heat from natural gas.
It's the 3 states.
3 states.
California, Hawaii, and Idaho. California, don't let the nuclear come on. Shut it down as soon as you can. Underestimate the cost of decommissioning and don't get the full life out of the original investment. Hawaii, sold out by the federal government, by a particular presidential administration, to not allow American-generated energy source of coal to help sell to Hawaii. And then finally, Idaho, that is sitting in a good spot because it had a very, very great source of hydropower, but that as a percentage of overall power demand is decreasing. And we need to increase power, not just for residential, but for all of our industrial applications.
The entire state.
And we can.
and we can.
with micro reactors.
But not just microreactors. Microreactors, the advantage of them is you can put them into a microgrid and you can have secure power. And that's where we need to be headed with the entire country. And that was identified right after 9/11. We need to shift from the grid system to microgrids. That was identified right after 9/11. But we continue to put money into the grid system, such as we're doing right here in Idaho by funding a project that was conceived well over 20 years ago before the risks were fully realized, not accepted, I'm just saying realized. The risk to the grid has not been accepted by everybody who's putting in additions to the grid. We have this Hemingway-Boardman extension is one of them. Why? We are just giving our adversaries another form or another link in our North American grid to be vulnerable to shut us down. We don't need to be putting money into the grid except to maintain what we have. Certainly no new money. All new money should be being put in to microgrids to supply a firm like the new data center over in Kuna to power new manufacturing in the state of Idaho. All the states, but especially in Idaho. We should be inviting and we should be powering new manufacturing and new data centers with micro reactors, such as the molten salt nuclear battery that's going to be manufactured right over in Blackfoot, Idaho. We should lead the nation. Idaho should be the state for all of the states to emulate. And right now we're falling behind verbally and in the press, Texas and Utah. There's no reason for that. We have everything here. We just need to do it.
Richard, as always, I learned a lot today. Is there anything you'd like to add here at the end?
No, I think this has been very productive, and I especially want to see us here in Idaho, as I've chosen Idaho to live out my life. Don't make the same mistakes that Hawaii has made. Don't make the mistakes that especially California has made, because the anti-nuclear people that got their start in California are here, and they're trying to adversely affect Idaho, and we don't want them to do that.
Thank you, sir, as always, for coming. This is our 5th installment. We'll do 6. We have more coming. God bless it. We'll do it again.